March 15th, 2018. 3:47 a.m. Somewhere in the Atlantic, a 911 call goes out from a cruise ship. A 16-year-old girl is missing, last seen on deck 7. By sunrise, they find her phone by the railing. Screen cracked. No Maya, no trace. No answers. By noon, the ship calls off the search. 3 days later, her mother, Kesha Matthews, flies home to Atlanta with an empty suitcase and a death certificate for a child whose body was never found. At the cemetery, she buries an empty coffin. She screams at a grave with no daughter inside. And somehow, she keeps breathing. 6 years of pain with no name. 6 years of learning how to exist inside a wound that never fully closes. Until one Saturday afternoon, in Puerto Rico, Kesha sees a woman who looks exactly like her dead daughter. A woman pushing a stroller, laughing with 2 small children. Kesha blinks, watches, tells herself she's imagining it. If Maya were alive, she'd be 22 now, maybe even a mother. But before Kesha can look away, a man walks up behind the woman and kisses her gently on the head. Her husband, Kesha thinks, and when Kesha sees his face, her entire world collapses. Because the man standing there is Derek Bennett, Kesha's ex-husband, Maya's stepfather. The man who disappeared from her life 6 years ago, after her daughter died. Welcome to Twist. Thank you to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates and hit that subscribe button. Let's go back to the beginning. Kesha Matthews, the mother Kesha, was born in 1976 in South Atlanta neighborhood, where mothers worked 2 jobs and still came home, smiling. Where Sunday church wasn't optional. Where family was everything. She became a single mother at 26 after Maya's biological father, Marcus, died in a construction accident. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. So Kesha did what mothers do. She survived. Double shifts as a nurse. Nights, days, whatever, paid the bills. Whatever kept Maya fed, warm, safe, whatever gave her daughter a chance. For years, it was simple. Work, sleep, Maya, repeat. In her late 30s, she went back to school, earned a psychology degree, and became a child psychologist. For the first time, she could breathe a little. That's when she met Derek Bennett at a hospital charity event. Charming, confident, attentive. The kind of man who makes you feel seen after years of feeling invisible. They married in 2016. Derek legally adopted Maya, who was 14. Kesha thought she'd finally given Maya the life she deserved: a stable home, a father figure, a family. But the man she married wasn't the man she thought he was. Derek Bennett, the predator. Born in 1979 in Birmingham, Alabama. Middle child, emotionally neglected, not abused, just ignored. He learned early how to get attention, read people, say what they want to hear. Become whoever the room needed. A perfect salesman, literally. Pharmaceutical sales, high income, tailored suits, perfect smiles. Co-workers later said the same thing. Derek always knew what to say, and none of it felt real. He had 2 previous relationships, both ended abruptly. No one wanted to talk about him afterward. Gambling debts, secret accounts, cracks he hid behind a charming face, and an expensive car. Kesha never knew any of it. Maya Bennett, the daughter born in 2002, spring baby. Artist, photographer, quiet soul with a notebook full of drawings and a camera always around her neck. For years it was just her and Kesha, 2 against the world. Their own rhythm, their own jokes. But around age 14, something changed. Teachers saw it. Her best friend saw it. The school counselor saw it. Maya stopped making eye contact, stopped talking about home, stopped posting photos with Derek after December 2017. Her friend asked why. Maya said only, "It's complicated." But Kesha thought it was normal. Teenage distance. Untilitwasan. T. The family cruise. The beginning of the end. January 2018. Derek suggested a 10-day Caribbean cruise. Family bonding, he said, a chance to reconnect. Kesha desperate to mend the growing distance between her and Maya agreed. Derek booked everything. The dates, the cabin, the deck, everything. March 8th, 2018. The Carnival Destiny leaves Miami. Passengers later described them as normal. But the cabin steward noticed something strange. The girl spent hours alone on the balcony. Morning, afternoon, night. Always alone. Kesha kept a journal on the trip. Day 2. Maya won't eat with us. Ordered room service. Derek says, I'm smothering her. Maybe I am. Day 4, Cozumel, Mexico. Kesha went on a tour alone. Maya stayed behind with Derek. When Kesha returned, Maya was gone. Derek changed his story 3 times. Small inconsistencies. Easy to dismiss. But they piled up. Days 5 to 7. Staff noticed Kesha becoming anxious. Always asking if anyone had seen her daughter. Always looking for her. Derek kept brushing it off. She's 16. Give her space. The last night, March 14th. Their final dinner together. The waiter would never forget it. The girl looked terrified, like she wanted to run. She kept checking the exits. Wouldn't look at Derek. Pulled her hand away from her mother instinctively. That was the last time Kesha saw Maya alive. Or so she believed. The night she vanished, March 15th. Las 2:47 Alto M. Kesha wakes up. Cold alert. Maya's bed is empty. Las 2:51 Alto M. Check the bathroom. Balcony. Derek fully dressed in the hallway. He says he woke up and saw Maya gone. Says he was looking for her. Kesha asks why he didn't wake her. He has no answer. 3:15 a.m. security alerted. Las 3:52 Alto M. A passenger reports something in the water near deck 7. 6:33 a.m. they find Maya's phone by the railing. Screen cracked. Las 7:10 Alto M. Derek found rocking on the stairs saying, She's gone. I couldn't stop her. By the time the ship docked, the case was ruled accidental death. Possible suicide. No foul play. Kesha went home with nothing but grief. Derek went home to grieving husband, consoling stepfather, supportive man. 6 weeks later, he walked out of her life forever. 6 years passed. Therapy, breakdowns, 2 suicide attempts, a private investigator, a cold case, and then a fruit stand in Puerto Rico. A woman who looked just like Maya. Children who could only be hers. A man who should not be alive in her life. Derek, after 6 years of desperate healing, Kesha had finally begun to find a fragile kind of peace-small breaths in a life built on ruins. But peace is a thin surface. It shatters easily. And in an open-air marketplace in Old San Juan. It shattered. She had seen a woman who could only be my older now. 22, hair pulled back, choosing fruit while two children tugged at her shirt. And beside her, smiling, relaxed, completely at ease, stood Derek Bennett, the man who abandoned Kesha 6 weeks after the funeral. The man who vanished, the man whose lies had shaped every moment of her suffering. No hallucination, no grief-induced vision, a living daughter, a living monster, a living lie. The world froze around Kesha. The vendors, the music, the crowds, everything became distant. The only reality was the impossible scene unfolding 10 feet away. The face she'd kissed as a baby, the walk she memorized, the birthmark beneath the ear she'd kissed 1,000 times. It was Maya, alive, whole, laughing. Then the man beside her turned. Derek's face, unmistakable, hit Kesha like a fist to the chest. And just like that, 6 years of grief inverted themselves into 6 seconds of clarity. The dead were not dead, the guilty were not gone, and the truth had been living comfortably in Puerto Rico under a new name. Maya saw her next. Recognition washed over her face like a wave of ice. Terror followed. Derek sensed it instantly. Their eyes locked with Kesha's for a single horrifying second. And then they fled. Not running, moving quickly, deliberately, pushing the stroller, lifting the boy, escaping into the maze of the marketplace with the fluidity of people who had practiced disappearing. Kesha couldn't breathe, couldn't shout, couldn't move. Her body collapsed long before her mind understood what she'd witnessed. Friends carried her away, convinced she was having a breakdown, unaware that the breakdown was reality itself tearing open. But Kesha knew the truth. Her daughter was alive. Her ex-husband was alive, and both had built a life from her ashes. She returned the next morning, and the next, and the next, searching every vendor, showing photos, begging for any scrap of confirmation she wasn't losing her sanity. Until a fruit vendor finally paused, pointed at the picture, and offered a name. Maria Rivera. Comes on Tuesdays and Saturdays, 2 children. Always buying mangoes. A stranger to the world, but not to Kesha. This time, hope hurt almost as much as grief. She waited again on Tuesday, and nothing. Wednesday, nothing. Thursday, nothing. Everything inside her cracked again. But on Friday, the last day before their flight, fate shifted. There they were. Derek, Maya, the children, shopping like a family who had never caused earthquakes in anyone else's life. Kesha followed, not with rage, not with panic. With a terrifying calm, a taxi, a license plate, a 20-minute drive into the hills, a yellow house at the end of a dirt road. A home, not hers, not anymore, but a home built out of her nightmare. She watched, memorized, absorbed every detail like evidence in a case only she seemed to remember existed. That night, she didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't fall apart. She planned what she would say, what she would demand, what truth she would take back. The next morning, before sunrise, she was gone. Left a note, left her family, left her fear behind. She went to the yellow house and knocked. She stood at the yellow house, staring at the door that separated 6 years of agony from 6 years of stolen peace. Her hand rose on its own, 3 slow knocks, the kind that echo inside a person's bones. Footsteps approached light. Hesitant, then the door opened. Maya stood in front of her, alive, older, changed, but unmistakably, painfully, heartbreakingly Maya. The mug in her hand slipped and shattered on the tile. Coffee splashed across the floor like spreading blood. Behind her, 2 children froze mid-play, sensing the shift in the air. For a moment, the world stopped. The daughter Kesha buried. The daughter she mourned. The daughter she'd screamed for at a grave with no body was standing right there, alive. Time collapsed. 6 years of suffering compressed into a single, unbearable second. Kesha stepped into the house without waiting for an invitation. Some doors don't require permission. The children were sent away. A door clicked, shut down the hall, and for the first time in 6 years, mother and daughter stood alone, separated by nothing but truth. The truth hurt more than the lie ever did. For hours, the silence between them sat like a third presence, heavy, suffocating, impossible to escape. They waited for Derek, the architect of it all, the man who turned a child's confusion into devotion, a mother's love into torment, and a family into a crime scene waiting to happen. When he finally arrived, sun-worn and unsuspecting, he stepped into his own reckoning. He didn't get to speak first. Kesha Matthews. The man who once crafted excuses with surgical precision suddenly found his words spilling out in panic, first gentle, then defensive, then cruel. A predator cycle laid bare in real time. He blamed everyone but himself. He minimized everything he had done. He painted a child as a seductress. He tried to rewrite history as if Kesha hadn't lived through every brutal page of it. And then, when cornered, he revealed who he truly was. Not a husband, not a father, not a victim. A manipulator, a liar, a man who had built his kingdom on the mind of a child. Kesha didn't come to the house with murder on her mind, but she had come with a gun. Purchased legally that morning, held tightly in her purse. Carried through 6 hours of truth, confession, and betrayal. It wasn't hatred that made her pull it out. It was clarity. A clarity sharpened by 6 years of grief, by a funeral with no body, by hospital stays, panic attacks, broken nights, and the gaping wound of maternal love with nowhere to go. Derek tried to escape, ran for the door. The gunshots stopped him. The echo bounced off the walls, off the toys, off the photographs of a life that wasn't supposed to exist. Derek Bennett collapsed to the floor, blood blooming across his work shirt. A predator brought down not by police, not by the justice system, but by the woman he underestimated, a mother he believed too broken to rise. But the shot did more than end Derek's life. It shattered the illusion Maya had been living under. Her scream rippled through the house, raw, panicked, unfiltered horror. The tutor cried out, terrified, their small voices piercing the smoke-filled silence. The moment after a gunshot is the longest moment in the world. Kesha dropped the gun. It clattered across the floor, loud and hollow. She fell to her knees, and the weight of everything past, present, future crashed over her at once. She had saved her daughter from a predator. She had destroyed her daughter's family. She had avenged 6 years of suffering. She had traumatized 2 innocent children. She had ended a life and revived another. The police would come. The judgment would come. The consequences would come. But in that moment, all she felt was the unbearable truth. Nothing she did would ever give her back the year she lost. Nothing. The house fell into a terrible stillness, a silence heavy enough to crush the air. Derek Bennett lay motionless on the floor. Blood pooled, spreading slowly across the tile. His final breath had escaped minutes earlier, but the horror he created lingered in the rooms he once controlled. Down the hallway, the children sobbed. Their cries weren't loud, not wailing, not screaming, but small, fractured sounds, the kind that break a person long before they reach the source. Maya gathered them, shielding their faces from the scene on the floor, from the truth they were far too young to understand. In that moment, she wasn't the girl who disappeared at 16. She wasn't the woman who built a life on a lie. She was simply a mother trying to protect her children from an image that would shape their memories forever. Kesha watched her, the daughter she raised, the daughter she lost, the daughter she found again in the worst way possible. She watched her and felt something sharp twist inside her chest knot. Anger, not relief, not vengeance. Something far more complicated. Something no word could fully hold. The children clung to Maya. Maya clung to them, and Kesha stood apart, witnessing a family she never knew existed, a family created from manipulation, from grooming, from lies, yet still real in its own fragile way. It would have been easier if Maya had been a ghost. Easier if the truth was monstrous from every angle. But nothing about this story offered easy edges. The sirens arrived before the guilt did. A neighbor had heard the gunshot, called authorities. Reported yelling, reported fear. Police cars filled the dirt road. Doors slammed. Officers rushed forward, a sequence Kesha had seen 1,000 times on the news, unfolding now with her at the center. They entered the house with guns drawn, shouted commands. Scanned the room. Saw the blood. Saw Derek. Saw the weapon. Saw Kesha. She stepped forward without resistance, hands raised, voice steady. Decision already made, she confessed before anyone asked. No hesitation. No denial. No attempt to rewrite the truth. She had shot Derek Bennett. She had ended the man who stole her daughter. She had done it knowing what it meant. The cuffs closed around her wrists with a metallic finality. Maya watched from the floor, holding her children close, tears carving silent paths down her face. Not for Derek. Not for the life she'd have been. But for the collision of two worlds she had kept separate for 6 long years, worlds that had crashed into each other with deadly force. As officers led Kesha out, the last thing she saw was the closed bedroom door behind which her grandchildren were hiding. Children who had done nothing wrong. Children who would grow up with questions no one could fully answer. And the last thing she heard was Maya's voice, broken, barely audible, calling out her name. Not in anger, not in accusation, in grief. The cycle repeating itself in a new, tragic form. Kesha was placed in the back of a police car. The door closed. The world outside blurred behind tinted glass. For the first time in 6 years, she felt something unfamiliar. Not closure, not peace, not victory, just stillness. A quiet inside her that came not from healing, but from the end of a chapter too heavy to carry any longer. The drive to the station was long and silent. The future ahead was longer still, but the truth was finally out of the shadows. The lies were broken open. The ghosts were living flesh again. What remained was everything the justice system would try to make sense of. A mother who killed a predator. A daughter who ran from her life. Children caught between worlds, and 6 years of grief laid bare for the world to examine. There are stories where justice is clear, where good and evil stand on opposite sides, where the hero and the villain never share the same room. This isn't one of those stories. This is what happens when love, trauma, manipulation, and desperation collide in a single moment, one trigger pull that ends one life and exposes everything else. And this was only the beginning. The interrogation room was cold, sterile, familiar to anyone who had ever seen a crime documentary. A metal table. 2 chairs. A camera mounted in the corner. Its slow, blinking light marking every second with quiet judgment. Kesha sat alone at first. Her clothes still carried the dust of Derek's driveway, the faint scent of gunpowder, and a smear of dried blood along the side of her shoe. It wasn't hers, but in the eyes of the law, that didn't matter. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't pleading. She was just still, as if 6 years of chaos had finally settled into a single point of gravity. When the detectives entered, they approached her not like a monster, not like a murderer, but like someone balancing on the edge of something fragile. They read her rights. She listened quietly, and then she told them everything. Not the polished version, not the soft one, not the one grief had restructured into something bearable. The truth. Raw. Exposed. Undeniable. She spoke of the cruise ship, the empty coffin, the journal entries, the disappearance, the abandonment, the breakdowns, the years of trying to survive what she never understood. She told them how she saw her daughter alive in Puerto Rico, how she recognized her birthmark, her gait, her eyes, the unmistakable truth of blood recognizing blood. She told them about the chase, the yellow house, the confrontation, the gun, and the moment, the trigger, changed everything. The detectives didn't interrupt. They wrote. They exchanged glances, small, sharp glances that suggested her story was more than just grief-fueled delusion. It was too detailed, too coherent. Too precise. One detective left the room. Phone calls were made. Checks were run. It didn't take long. Within hours, Derek Bennett was confirmed alive under multiple aliases. A man who had fled jurisdictions, left a cold case in his wake, committed fraud, evasion, and far darker crimes the justice system had never uncovered. Then came the breakthrough. A name from 6 years ago resurfaced. Carlos Rodriguez, this ship's maintenance worker whose statement had raised quiet suspicions but was buried under bureaucracy. He was found in Miami, still alive, still working, still carrying the weight of a decision he thought would remain hidden forever. It took less than 2 hours for him to confess. He told investigators everything. The cash payment, the blind spot location on Deck 7, the planted phone, the staged man overboard report, the private boat waiting in the Bahamas, the fake passport, the escape route, the flight to Guatemala. Every detail matched what Kesha had described. This wasn't a delusion. This wasn't a breakdown. It was the truth. The truth no one had ever bothered to look for. By midnight, the interrogation room felt different. The detective's posture changed. The energy shifted. Kesha wasn't the unstable, grieving mother anymore. She was the center of a case that had been misclassified, mishandled, and ignored for 6 long years. But truth alone doesn't tirarse a bullet. By dawn, the charges were filed. 2nd-degree murder, intent, emotion, violence. A life taken, but also a life reclaimed. Outside the police station, Puerto Rico's morning sun rose over a world forever changed. Kesha remained behind locked doors. Maya was taken into custody hours later, charged with fraud, conspiracy, and knowingly participating in a fake death. 2 children were placed in protective care, confused and terrified, clinging to each other in a world suddenly emptied of everyone they knew. Janelle arrived days later. She expected chaos. She expected lies. She expected disbelief. What she found was 2 broken children, a devastated niece, and a sister whose entire life had been reduced to a stack of paperwork and a cell. She took custody of the children. She took on a responsibility she never asked for, and she began the slow, quiet process of building a life for them far from the yellow house on the hill. The story would not end quickly. It would not end cleanly. It would not end with satisfaction, because some stories don't end. They echo through trials, through therapy, through the lives of children who must learn to understand events too big for their age, through a mother sitting in prison, counting the years lost compared to the years stolen. A predator was dead, a daughter was alive. A mother had pulled the trigger, but just as real, complicated, painfully complicated, and the world was only just beginning to judge what happened in that yellow house. The legal system moved slowly, grinding forward with the weight of every decision that had been ignored 6 years earlier. But for Kesha Matthews, time inside the holding cell did not move at all. Each hour felt hollow, suspended. Neither past nor future, just an echo of everything that had led her here. Her lawyer arrived from Atlanta, carrying years of Kesha's pain in a neatly organized folder. He listened to her story in silence, absorbing each detail with the grim understanding of a man who knew a jury would have to confront more than a single gunshot. He told her the truth. The law did not care about heartbreak. It cared about intent, about actions, about consequence, and Kesha had pulled the trigger. The courtroom would have to decide why. In the months leading up to the trial, investigators continued uncovering the reality Kesha had lived with, unknowingly, for years. The timeline of the cruise, the falsified death, the offshore accounts, the fake identities, the travel records, the journals left behind in dusty boxers. Every new discovery validated her story, but validation wasn't freedom. When the trial began in May 2024, the courtroom filled with strangers hungry for a simple explanation to an unsimple tragedy. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras captured her walk to the defense table. The world wanted to know whether this woman was a murderer or a mother pushed beyond her limits. The prosecution painted the picture cleanly. Premeditation, a gun purchased that morning, a taxi ride to a remote home. Hours spent waiting for Derek to arrive. Their argument was simple. Kesha Matthews didn't snap. She planned, the defense built a different picture, messier, heavier, painfully human. 6 years of unresolved grief. 2 suicide attempts. A life that had collapsed under the weight of uncertainty. And then, the shock of seeing a daughter believed to be dead alive, with the man who destroyed everything. Experts took the stand. Trauma psychologists explained the fracture that can occur when a mother's reality is ripped open after years of mourning. Counselors described the long-term impact of ambiguous loss of grief, without closure, without evidence, without finality. Witnesses remembered Kesha before and after the disappearance. A loving mother turned into a hollow version of herself, a woman undone by her child's vanishing, a survivor who never once received the justice she begged for. Then came Maya. Her testimony was the courtroom's breaking point. She spoke of Derek's attention, his grooming, the slow manipulation that blurred fatherly affection into control. She described being 15 and thinking she was in love, being 16 and believing Derek's promises, believing that running away meant freedom, believing her mother was strong enough to survive the grief. And for the first time, the world understood the impossible truth. Maya was both a victim and a participant, a child under control and an adult who carried the lie too far, a daughter who disappeared and let her mother drown. But even that confession could not change the fact that Derek Bennett died from a bullet fired by Kesha's hand. And the law demanded an answer. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury returned with a verdict that reflected the impossible complexity of the case. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter, not murder, not self-defense. A crime born from extreme emotional disturbance. 8 years, with the possibility of parole in 4. The courtroom erupted, some in outrage, some in relief, some in quiet understanding that there was no perfect ending for a story built from exploitation, grief, and survival. Kesha didn't cry, didn't protest, didn't collapse. She simply nodded as if accepting a sentence was easier than surviving the 6 years that led to it. Maya's trial followed. Less spectacle, less attention, but equally heavy. As a minor, when everything began, she was recognized as a victim of grooming, but as an adult who upheld the lie, she was held accountable. 5 years. Federal prison. She accepted her sentence the same way her mother had Queely, with the understanding that the truth, once revealed, rarely leaves anyone unscarred. The children went to Atlanta with Gina, and for the first time in their young lives, they entered a world where the adults around them were not lying. But not a world without pain. A world where their father was dead, where their mother was gone, where the grandmother they barely knew would speak to them through glass once a month. A world full of therapy sessions and questions, with no child-friendly answers. A world built from choices they never made. Prison is quieter than most people imagine. Not peaceful, just quiet in a way that feels heavy, suspended, like time has decided to move at half speed. For Kesha Matthews, the quiet was almost familiar. She had lived in a kind of emotional prison for 6 years already. This one simply had walls. She adapted quickly. Routine helped, medication helped, therapy helped. But above everything else, the visits helped. Once a month, Janelle brought the children. They had grown in ways Kesha had missed. Marcus taller now, his curls falling over his forehead, eyes old for his age. Kira more confident, coloring outside the lines, with a stubborn smile that reminded Kesha of herself. The visits took place behind glass, a barrier both thin and infinite. Marcus always asked the hardest questions. Why did you shoot my daddy? Are you going to come home? Did Mummy do something wrong? Is it my fault? Kesha answered carefully, honestly. Without venom, without justifying violence, without lying. She told him Derek hurt people. She told him she was angry. She told him he wasn't to blame for any of it. She told him the truth in pieces small enough not to crush him. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he nodded. Sometimes he looked away, processing in the way only children can, slowly, quietly, privately. Kira, too young to understand, simply pressed her tiny hand against the glass. Kesha pressed back, a gesture that became their ritual, a ritual that kept her alive. The children were in therapy. Their nightmares were frequent. Their drawings were telling, but they were safe. They were loved, and they were healing, piece by fragile piece. Janelle, exhausted but determined, built a home around them. Schools, doctors, meals at the table, holidays, without chaos. It wasn't easy, but nothing about this story had ever been easy. Meanwhile, miles away in a different facility, Maya faced a future she never imagined. Her therapy sessions were mandatory 3 times a week, peeling back layers of manipulation, shame, regret, and responsibility. The counselor saw a young woman who had lived under the shadow of a predator for too long, and then under the weight of her own decisions for even longer. Her journals filled up again, like they once did when she was a teenager. But these pages told a different story, one about accountability, about grief for the mother she betrayed, about love for the children she missed, about a life built on a foundation she never chose. She wrote her mother every week. Long letters, short letters, apologies woven into every sentence, explanations wrapped in regret. For months, Kesha didn't reply. Forgiveness is not a door that opens easily, not after 6 years of hell and 1 moment of irreversible violence. Eventually, on a quiet October morning, she did reply. 1 sentence. The kids are okay. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't healing. But it was a beginning. A thin thread stretching between a mother and the daughter she lost twice. The world around them moved on, as it always does after tragedy fades from headlines. But inside the prisons, inside the homes, inside the therapy offices, the story continued to echo. It echoed in the questions Marcus asked at bedtime, in the nightmares Kira woke from, in the homework Janelle helped with, in the quiet hours Maya spent alone, and in the long nights Kesha lay awake, counting the years she couldn't get back. They were all living inside the consequences of a single man's choices and a single woman's response. Justice had been served according to the law, but justice rarely feels like victory. Sometimes it feels like survival. Sometimes it feels like devastation. Sometimes it feels like a story with no clean ending. Kesha S. earliest parole date is 2028. Maya S. release date is 2029. Marcus and Kira will be in elementary school by then, old enough to understand more, but still too young to understand everything. What happens when Maya gets out? Where do the children go? Do they return to the mother who loves them but broke their world, or stay with the woman who saved them but shattered their household? Will Kesha and Maya ever stand face to face again without a wall between them? No one knows. Some stories resolve. Some stories close neatly. Some stories give us answers. This one doesn't. Because some tragedies don't end. They evolve. What happened on that cruise ship, in that yellow house, in that courtroom, and inside those 2 prisons will echo for decades in the lives of the only truly innocent people in this entire narrative. Marcus and Kira, the children who now carry the legacy of a crime they never committed. A crime they were born into. A crime they witnessed the consequences of before they could spell the word justice. What they become, how they heal, oh, how they understand their past will determine the real ending of this story, not the verdict. Not the sentences. Not the death. The children. They are the ending and the beginning. The public moved on long before the people inside this story did. News cycles changed. People argued online for a week, some calling Kesha a murderer, others calling her a hero, and then the noise faded, as it always does. But the quiet that followed was in peace. In prison, Kesha learned to live with the consequences of a moment that felt, to her, like the only moment she'd ever been fully alive in 6 years. A moment where grief and truth collided so violently that the laws of reason no longer applied. She did not justify what she did. She did not deny it. She did not apologize for it. She simply accepted it because acceptance was the only thing she had left. In another facility, hundreds of miles away, Maya counted days through bars she built for herself, long before the legal ones. She spent hours trying to understand the girl she once was, the woman she became, and the mother she desperately hoped to be again. Her letters to Kesha continued. Some long, some short. A slow unraveling of a life shaped by manipulation. A slow rebuilding of a self that had never been allowed to fully form. Kesha's replies remained rare, measured, careful. Forgiveness, if it ever arrived, would move at the pace of scar tissue, not at the pace of hope. Meanwhile, the two children grew in the care of a woman who had never expected to raise anyone else as kids. Janelle became the anchor, steady, patient, determined to pull Marcus and Kira toward a future free from the shadows their parents left behind. Their therapy sessions continued. The nightmares, slowly, became less frequent. The questions grew more mature, more painful, more complex. As they aged, they would learn the full truth, not all at once, but piece by piece, in age-appropriate fragments that eventually formed a devastating mosaic. A father who wasn't who he claimed to be, a mother who became lost before she ever had a chance to grow, a grandmother who killed a man to save a truth no one else believed, and two small children caught in the crossfire of a story written long before they were born. The courts had decided what justice looked like on paper, but justice in real life is not a verdict. It isn't a sentence. It isn't a number of years behind bars. Justice in this story is a question. A question every viewer asks themselves. A question every juror struggled with. A question no one will ever answer the same way. Was Kesha right? Was the bullet a crime, or was it a rescue? Did she kill a man, or did she end a predator? Did she act out of rage, or out of 6 years of unbearable truth? The law drew its line. The jury drew another. But in the hearts of the people watching this story unfold, the line shifts depending on where you stand as a parent, a child, a survivor, or simply a witness to the unimaginable. And what about Maya? Is she a villain for disappearing, or a victim for being broken? Is she responsible for what she did at 16? Or is she still paying for decisions made under the influence of a man twice her age? Is she the architect of her mother's suffering, or the final casualty of Derek's manipulation? There are no easy answers here. There never were. And maybe that is the lesson buried deep inside this tragedy. Some stories, Dante, give us closure. Some stories don't restore balance. Some stories don't end with good guys and bad guys. Some stories simply show us the darkest edges of love, grief, desperation, and survival. 6 years after she buried an empty coffin, Kesha Matthews found her daughter alive. 6 years after she begged God for answers, she found them in the arms of the man who destroyed her life. 6 years after she thought her story was over, she discovered it had only just begun. Now she waits, in a cell, counting days until parole. Counting the birthdays she missed. Counting the moments she might one day rebuild with the grandchildren who pressed their small hands against the glass wall to reach her. And somewhere else, Maya waits too. Not for freedom, not for forgiveness, but for the chance to face the world as a woman no longer defined by the man who groomed her. And as for Derek Benny, his story ended the moment the truth caught up to him on a tile floor. The real legacy he left behind is not his death. It's the devastation he planted in others. The lies, the manipulation, the brokenness, the fallout. His grave in Birmingham is small, unremarkable, visited only by the woman who raised him and never knew who he became. But the story he created, it lives on in courtrooms, therapy rooms, prison cells, and the memories of two children who will spend a lifetime trying to understand the adults who shaped their world. So here is the question that closes this story, the only question that matters. If you were Kesha Matthews, standing in that yellow house, looking at the man who stole your daughter's life, your own life, and 6 years of your soul, with the gun in your hand, what would you have done? Justice or murder? Sanity or rage? Right or wrong? There are no clean answers, only the ones you choose to believe. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you question the nature of justice, leave your thoughts in the comments. And be sure to subscribe for more stories just like this. Stories that ask the questions we hope we never face. This is Twisted Crime Unveiled, where the truth is never simple and the endings are never clean.